And our featured presenter tonight, is John Wiegley, who is a co-maintainer of Emacs. He asked me to say he was inactive, but I think he still got commit access, so I'm going with it. John gave a really well-received, actually he gave a talk about OrgMode a year and a half ago, but that was before we had like a place with recording equipment. So I'm really excited he's back. It was a great presentation. Any of you who've seen this video on Majit know this is going to be fantastic, and I'm super excited. After this, of course, we got a handful of people doing small presentations about OrgMode. I hope maybe to add some of you. So without further ado, John Wiegley.
So I intentionally did not script this evening because I wanted to show you how I actually use OrgMode from day to day. So I'm going to go through with you what I basically do on a given day, and then you can see what parts of it I use, what parts of it I don't use. Okay, so in general, I don't edit too much. I don't spend too much of my time in the OrgMode files themselves. I spend most of my time in the agenda view, but in order to get the tasks set up for the day or for the week, I start out in the file. So here's a file that I use for keeping track of all the open source work that I'm involved in. And you can see that every task either has a to-do for the things that I have to do, or usually it has project. And I use project for the larger tasks that aren't complete until all the subtasks are completed, or that maybe I might leave around so I can collect new tasks into it. And Org has this feature called Refile targets, so that when you have a task somewhere and you want to move it. So in OrgMode, if there's too many key bindings to even mention in OrgMode. So as I say them, just please either watch the video after or look these up in the manual. So if I'm sitting on a task, I can type Control-C, Control-W. And I don't know why it's called Control-C, Control-W. But that will refile a task or move it to another location. And all of these names you're seeing at the bottom of my screen in tiny text, that's all the things that have the label project. So I want to be able to move tasks into projects wherever that file is. I do have files for the different major categories of life: personal, community, family, work, whatnot. And then each of those has many projects within them. But I don't think in terms of files too much. I'm just thinking in terms of the projects. So when I want to make a new task, for example, I hit Meta-M to select the capture template. And Meta-M is not the default binding. I chose it because it has no real meaning on the Mac. It's not used for anything. I think it's like minimize. That's something I never want to have happen. So I picked something very quick, and it's easy for me to type and to remember that Meta-M is like for memory. So I type Meta-M-A, and it's going to allow me to create another task. And I've defined a capture template that fills in this text that you see here. Now, everything I'm mentioning is in my .emacs repository on GitHub. So you can find my capture templates. You can see how I've all set it up. I even have a separate .org.el, which is just the file I use for setting up my OrgMode configuration. And in my capture template, I have these properties of the UUID that will uniquely identify this task for all time, so I can link to it uniquely, or whichever file it moves into, and then when I created the task, just so that I can reference this information in the future. Anyway, I say hello. And this will go into a special project called Inbox in my main file. And if I start out my day, I can do a query on everything that's in the inbox. And queries are set up by these things called custom commands. So you can define in the Emacs customization interface all these different reports that you can do. And again, you'll find this in my GitHub repository. And I have a few of these set up, and I'm going to refer to them without showing you their definitions. But just suffice it to say, there is one project called Inbox that all captured things go into immediately. There's also an app on my phone called Drafts that when I put a note into it, it goes into the inbox in OrgMode. My watch, there's a button I can press on it that when I speak to it, that text goes into the inbox in OrgMode. So I have 3 different ways of very rapidly and quickly capturing ideas. And the key thing here is not to organize up front, just to get ideas down out of my head. Because if I can get them down out of my head, I can think about something else. And I don't have that building anxiety that I'm leaving things falling on the floor and I'm forgetting stuff. So I capture constantly. I'm maybe generating 30 to 40 things by the time I reach the end of the day. Not all of those are going to end up being kept as tasks. Some of them were just links to things I found in Firefox, and I want to remind myself to go read it without making a bookmark that gets buried in a list of bookmarks. So I make all these tasks, and the ones that I can dispatch, I might just delete right away. All it was, make sure to say hi to somebody, and I know I said hi to them, so I'm just going to delete the task and not keep it. But when the task is in the inbox and I realize this needs future work, I will then hit this Control-C, Control-W on it and file it into a project. So here we are in my open source projects file, and we've got all these tasks in here that got moved into this file by that means. Control-C, Control-W from the inbox. Now in OrgMode, we can type Shift-Tab to collapse everything in the file, and that will show you my top-level categories of open source work, just 5 of them. And then if I hit Shift-Tab twice, I get to see the top lines, the headlines of all the tasks that are in all of those projects. And you can see that many of these high-level projects have lots of sub-projects. So these are all the Haskell libraries that I'm in some way either contributing to or have ideas about, or I'm the one that's maintaining them. And then I have similar projects related to Nix, projects related to Coq. But there's a lot of tasks going in here, and this creates the next step of the process. This step of the process I might do on a Saturday or a Sunday when I have a lot of time, which is now reviewing what is all this work that I've set myself up to do. Because I'm a human being, and in a way I have to game myself to get anything done. Because human psychology seems to always be working against me. Like my own best intentions are the last thing that actually happens. On the road to that end, I have to fight with all my inclinations to be lazy or to get distracted or to do other things. So OrgMode is kind of my middle ground, my defense against that, my own humanity. So the first thing I have to do is look at this sea of things that past me committed future me to doing, and deciding, well, which one of these is today me actually going to consider as a possibility. So I will go through this file, and I'll run a sorting function I have here, org-sort-all, which will sort of put it into a better order with all the to-dos at the top and all the highest priority to-dos at the top. And I'll look at each one sometimes. Not always. Maybe once a month I'll go through each of these files through its entirety and ask myself, do I still care about this? If I mark it deferred, it means I don't want to delete the idea, but I don't want to see it in my lists of to-dos, my global list of to-dos anymore. This is a rainy day idea now. There's an even more downgraded state, which is someday, which is like, okay, if I ever get independently wealthy and I'm totally bored, this is a task I could pick up, but likely that's never going to happen. Deferred is more usually maybe 6 months, a year from now, but I want to keep it in the file and keep looking at it. The to-dos, though, if I see one and I think, yeah, today is a really great idea to talk to Mathieu about collaborating on a control theory library, I'll schedule it for today. Or I'll schedule it for some day in this coming week, because it's usually a weekend that I'm looking at this file. So I'll type Control-C, Control-S, and I'll say, oh, today's a good day, I'll say Wednesday. And then I might look through the rest of the tasks and schedule one for Thursday, one for Friday. But I have to be careful, because I can get way too ambitious about what I'm committing future me to do. And future me is totally incalcitrant. It will not do the things I assigned to him. He will have found other cool stuff that he wants to do before he gets to this stuff. So my only way to really work out an arrangement with future me is to be very circumspect and focused in what I'm going to ask him to do. So I only get maybe 3 to 4 of my tasks done a day, or I'll get like 10% of my tasks done a day. So one way I game myself is I overcommit to underdeliver. But if I can overcommit enough, my underdelivery starts approximating where I want future me to, what I want him to be doing. And so that's another trick that I use. And you'll find in OrgMode, just the fact that you have a task list isn't magical. It's not going to make you get more stuff done. It might make you less anxious about your ideas of what you want to get done, but it won't make the actual doing happen. That's going to require you figuring out who you are and how you work, and then tailoring OrgMode to work for you. So for me, this will mean picking out maybe the 3 juiciest, most fun, most exciting things in this list and scheduling them for a couple days. Maybe not even because I'm going to do it that day, but I at least want the idea to be brought back to mind, because maybe I'll get excited about it again. Maybe that'll prompt me to ping somebody on IRC or to reach out to somebody by email, and that will snowball into a collaboration that then actually does make the thing happen. I found that pair programming by far is the most effective way for me to get anything done. So I like to find a person that shares the same interest. We can spark off of each other and then actually get some productive work accomplished. So after I've gone through the file enough and I've scheduled the things I want, you can see how much of my open source life is being deferred here as the demands of work and family overcome them. I type Control-C-A-A, which is a default key in org mode, to look at the agenda. And the agenda shows me what have I scheduled for today. And this is a window into my tasks that is intentionally narrowing it down to only the things I thought I could manage or want to focus on today. And so this is the funnel. This is the way I make 1,000 tasks not feel like 1,000 tasks. If this list is less than 7, I might do 1. I might do 2. But at least I did it, right? And I wouldn't have done it if I didn't have OrgMode at all. So I count that 1 or 2 as a serious success. And I forward everything else into the future. And I kid you not, there was one day when I had a task in OrgMode to reply to somebody to an email. And I wrote them back. I finally did the task. And I said, I know you sent me this email 10.5 years ago. I just wanted you to know I never forgot. And here's my response. And they laughed. They were so delighted by this that I had finally responded. But OrgMode kept me honest, right? But, so don't take any of my promises about time too seriously, yes?
How do you think about scheduling versus deadlines?
Scheduling versus deadlines, okay. I do make deadlines in OrgMode quite a bit. Let's make a deadline on this task for Friday. And now we'll show with this little D02 that signals to me that it has 2 days until it reaches its deadline. I also use priorities with both scheduling and deadline, so I might mark this A. And let me say what I mean by these things, because that's another way to communicate to future self, which is, if I say it's a deadline, it means if you do it beyond that date, it's not worth doing it because you missed something. There was a scheduled thing this talk, preparing for this talk would be a deadline task because it's not worth the task even existing if I go past the deadline and don't do it. Or Jeff has to forgive me for not actually doing any of the preparing. So mainly I'm using deadlines for actual hard concrete things where I can't move the date. I schedule stuff for a day just to give myself a prompt to see things on that day that's a narrowed view onto all of my tasks. I use a priority of A to mean if I don't do this on the day that I scheduled, something bad happens, meaning somebody's disappointed with me or it's going to cost me money. Sometimes if it's a lot of money, I'll make that a deadline instead of an A. If it's a B task, it means, well, I ought to do this today. There's no reason not to. And if it's a C, it really is, this is cool. It's something I would love to do, but it's totally okay if I don't do it today. And in this agenda view, I just type F, and that will move it forward 1 day into the future. And then what I love to do is that you can just hit F a lot of times. Yeah, and now I've got all the time that I need to get to that task later in the future. You can also hit M and mark tasks, and then you can bulk schedule them, capital B, little s. I do that all the time. Usually what will happen to me is the weekend comes, you're filled with productive dreams, the weekend's now gone, you get into org mode, and it's all these things that were scheduled for Friday that haven't gotten done. So now I just bulk schedule them all to Monday, and then that happens 1 week, 2 weeks, and then I go through org mode bankruptcy where I say, okay, unschedule everything because I'm not doing any of it. I'm just giving myself this work of having to forward all these tasks all the time. And that's a cycle I end up going through a lot. And usually org mode becomes effective for me again when I go through that bankruptcy and I'm now back to only scheduling like 4 tasks. That's a totally realistic amount. And I use this for scheduling work stuff too, so I don't drop things on the floor. That's really mainly what this system is about, not dropping things on the floor. I can't really say so much that it makes me do more in my life. That happens more by just meeting up with friends and them saying, oh, hey, I have this idea, and we start doing it right then and there. That's when the most effective work happens. There's another task view I have, though, besides just the daily agenda when things are scheduled, is I can type Control-C-A-N, and this is a report I've written, which is based on some eLisp code that's in my .emacs repository. And what this does is it goes through every project in all of my files, and it finds the first to do in the list of tasks under each of those projects, and those are my next actions. So this is kind of like my nod to the GTD style of doing stuff. I want to see if I've ordered everything correctly in all of my files, which that's almost never true, but if that were the case, what would be the next first thing for every single one of my projects? This also becomes a list that's much too long. For the purposes of this presentation and it being recorded, I'm only showing you one of my org files. I have 4 more that I'm usually seeing, and they have different, I don't know if you can see the blue, but each major file has its own background color so that I can see at a glance how much of my day is dedicated to work, how much to family, how much to personal, how much to open source and community activities. Anyway, this list can be, well, it usually fills the whole buffer here. And then I'll just cherry pick it sometimes if I'm just wanting something to do when I'm at a cafe. Another thing that I'll do though is I go back to my OSS file and I will mark the project with a label called hot. And I have a report, Control A capital H, that will just show me the list of all hot projects. So these are all the active things are going on right now. People are probably waiting on me for things. The live projects, the stuff I'm actively doing, collaborating on that probably I don't even need OrgMode to remind myself about because I've been doing work in those projects very recently. And then if I type Control A lowercase h, this is that next action report, but only for the hot projects. And most likely, this is actually the list of the valuable things to get done. Probably that stuff I scheduled for myself Monday. But it depends on my mood and how I've been using OrgMode in the recent past. That may be the more valuable list to look at, but sometimes the hot next action list is the more valuable. Just because these are most likely the ones that I'm going to want to do, because that's why those projects are hottest from actively involved. And maybe even the ones I should pay attention to, because people might be expecting that. And that, and there's one other thing that I'm doing. This is the majority of me using OrgMode, is just all that I've shown you so far. Another thing that I will do if it's a work task is I will go into the task. I usually have notes associated with it, and I have a log. You know, I can add items that create a history of notes for that task. I use Control-C, Control-Z to quickly add a note, and I'll add lots of notes. One time I had a task to get a medical bill satisfied by Aetna, and it took me 9 months to get Aetna to pay that bill. And every single time I called a representative, I asked for their name, and I made a note in OrgMode. So that gave me the date, the time, their name, and exactly what they said to me. And when I accumulated a log of like 11 things, I then had a basis to say, no, you said that to me before. No, you told me that before. She said this on this date. And after a while, they just started believing me and finally got the thing to go through. That was a nightmare. But thank goodness to OrgMode. And believe it or not, I've gone to the dark side a couple times and tried to use more graphical, more iPhone-friendly to-do apps. And the one feature that they never have is this log feature, this ability to very quickly and easily add notes that have a historical tracking behind them. So if I go into this note now and I type Control-C, Control-X, Control-I, it will clock me in to this task. Don't do this for personal stuff, but I still do it for work stuff, even though I'm not, I don't have to report time at my company. I do it just to give myself a sense of how much time I'm spending at work. And I will work on this and then clock out. Well, it deletes the input if it's in the present. So let's, okay. Oh, it doesn't like that. Let's say it's a Tuesday. Oh, I have to resolve clocks. There we go. And then it'll tell me, okay, I worked on that for 24 hours. I might accumulate quite a long logbook depending on the nature of the task. And then if you see down here in the lower right of my screen, there's a little bar that's partly gray and partly red. And this is my meter. So what this meter is telling me is it's saying that in any given month, taking into account holidays, there is a nominal amount of hours I should be working if I'm going to work 8-hour days. So I kind of know what my company would be expecting of me if they wanted me working 9 hours a day, even though that may not be their expectation. But for me to be on track, I know how many hours I should be at by now. And this bar is saying, well, this is red because I'm behind, and that I need to work 7 more hours to get to nominal. Now, I haven't done any time tracking yet this week. That's why I'm this far behind. Usually I'm about 30 hours ahead, and then the bar is nice and green. And the amount of it that's red is tracking how deep into the month I am. So when the month very first starts, that bar will be a little sliver. So then I know whether it's red or green, it's not very significant. But if it's toward the end of the month and it's this big angry red bar, I know it's going to be it's going to be difficult to catch up with that. Or if it's a big, and it gets more intense. The intensity of that color relates to how deep I am on either side. And so if it's deep, deep, deep green, I know, hey, I can just kick off for the rest of the afternoon and not feel bad about that because I did all my work in overtime on earlier days. So that's the other aspect of OrgMode that I use, is just this sense of time and rooting me in a linear flow of time when ordinarily my thoughts would be very scattered. I would be forgetting what I had told people I would do. I would be forgetting things asked of me. When I first started using OrgMode, my wife really felt it was a revelation because she would ask me to do stuff around the house, and well, that didn't really happen too often. So in fact, there's a feature I added to OrgMode just for her, which is this thing at the bottom. You see this colorful little graph here? So this is the habit tracker. And Org Habit, which comes with OrgMode, the feature of Org Habit is this. There are tasks where it's in there because you want to get it done. But there's a whole other class of tasks in your life that it really doesn't matter so much that you do them, is that you do them with frequency. You do them with regularity, in fact, more than just frequency. So my wife doesn't ever really care that I did the dishes on a given night. She cares that I do the dishes often, or I do it with some regularity that she knows I'm a participant in the cleanliness of the household. So that's why I created the habit tracker. And what the habit tracker does is every time I mark this task done, it just comes right back. But it marks a star into the time graph. And then it starts coloring boxes blue if it's fine that I don't do it that day. It starts turning yellow when I get into the region of time that means, okay, now is the time that you ought to be doing that thing if you wanted the regularity you told me you wanted when you created this habit. And then it goes red when it's like, okay, now you're past that time. Now if you do it, it'll probably be acknowledged, but it will be seen as a thing you did late. So if I worked really, really hard, and well, there was a day when do the dishes was on this list, but if I worked hard, I could make that whole bar be green or blue. And then I knew what her perception of my progress on that task would be. The only bar you're seeing in the files that I've chosen right now is just called Review Tasks, and that's a reminder to me to review my tasks in OrgMode. I want to leave it open now for questions, if anybody has any. Yes?
Could you elaborate a little bit on your capture process, capture tools on the phone and watch? That's been a stumbling block for me.
Right. So the capture tool I use on the watch, the iPhone, on the iPhone, is called Drafts. And I don't know whether this company, I forget what their name is, they have a couple of neat apps, but it's called Drafts. It's at version 5. And you can take a note and create an action, and it comes with one which is Save to iCloud. And it will just put it in an iCloud folder named after Drafts, like the app folder for Drafts. And then on the Mac, I turn on the iCloud file sharing for desktop and documents. That will also pull in the folders for all the apps. So what Drafts writes into that folder appears here. And then, let me look at the ELISP code, what pulls this in. So this is the directory it ends up putting the file in. Is library, mobile documents, iCloud column, Agile Tortoise, Drafts 5 documents. And what will appear in there is .txt files whose name is the timestamp of the date and time when it was made. And then the contents will just be the text that I typed into the phone. So the ELISP I have here takes the name of the file and makes that be the date created timestamp. And it takes the content and makes that the headline, and any subsequent lines being the body, generates the UUID that I want every task to have, and then just inserts it into my inbox the way that Org Capture would have done. So there's no difference from my end of whether a task came from the phone or whether it came from Org Capture. I could capture that information too in this function, but I don't distinguish. And then the watch is just when you install Drafts on your iPhone, it installs an Apple Watch app. And when you speak into it, then you'll see it in Drafts. And then when I look at it in Drafts, I just have to hit the button that says Send to iCloud. And with Drafts 5, they've made all of that very streamlined.
So you still do need to explicitly send it to iCloud?
You need to send it to iCloud. If you go in from the watch, then you'll have to have a moment in time when you review everything you captured from the watch and just send them all in. And I think you can even bulk send them if you have a ton of them. If you're typing it in, well, you just finish your typing by hitting that button, and then it goes up and in right then. And the way that Org Capture is designed to work, if no one's used it before, is that when I type MA and I type issue my task and I hit Control C, it restores Emacs to exactly how everything was laid out before you hit the original key to begin the capture process. So it's designed to return you to exactly the state you were editing in. So it's zero impact on your workflow to just quickly get these tasks. And you can create smarter logic than that too. Like let's go into GNUs, which is a whole other series of presentations on its own. Amazing, amazing email reader. So if I go into GNUs and I'm reading a message, let's say I look at Matt Levine's money stuff, and I can type Command M, same key binding for capture, but now it populates with more properties, which is the date of the message as opposed to the date when I captured, a link that will take me back into GNUs and reading that same message again at any point in the future because it's linked to the IMAP message ID, and I do an IMAP search to find the original message, and then the author who wrote that message. But I also put the author's name in parens as the beginning of the task title, just so that when I'm reviewing the tasks in the agenda, I get some sense of where this task originated from without going into it too deeply. And I've also made other keys in the past to like just grab the current URL that's in the front window of Firefox, but they changed Firefox so that you can't get that by AppleScript on macOS anymore. There are other ways, other mechanisms for doing that. But the idea here being I want to capture something, I want to do it immediately, I want it to not impact my workflow, and I want it to automatically pull in as much context as I will need to make sense of it in the future because I may not look at it again for another year. No questions. All right. You're all going to make a task to go study OrgMode? Yes?
How do you use the UUIDs? How do those come back into your workflow?
Could you repeat the question for the recording?
So yes, she asked, how do I use the UUIDs that I'm generating when I make tasks? In OrgMode, you can create a link to another task. And without any type of identifying information that's unique, you usually have to do it based on the file it's in or a regular expression that would match the headline. But I sometimes edit the headlines as I'm doing my task review. So when I want to have one task be linked over to a task in another file, or to even, sometimes when I capture, it's not a task. I have another code called a note. And notes end up getting filed into a different file called notes.org. And here's all my notes. So like I have one here that's future delivery months because I want to remember what the letter codes are for those. I never can. But this is all these notes. And if I want to refer to a note as the informational context to get a task done, then I'll refer to it by its UUID. And OrgMode, there's a module that comes with OrgMode, or at least did, called OrgID. And it will build a database the first time you try to jump to an ID of all the IDs associated with all of your OrgMode nodes. And they don't have to be UUIDs. They just have to be a property field that is ID. But I figured, why not just go with UUIDs and I don't have to think about it. And then I hit jump to target of the link, and it will just open up the right OrgMode file, take me right to that issue. That said, haven't done that, I'd say, in the last 4 years. So I could get rid of UUIDs today, and I don't think I'd even notice it. I was going to mention, though, that in all the time I've been using OrgMode, which is since 2007, I have handled either closed or still have pending 12,440 tasks. More of those being closed than open, I definitely hope. And that's overusing OrgMode for 4,300 days. So that's an average of about 3 tasks a day that I'm either creating or getting done. And I don't know what I really would have done, where my life would have gone if OrgMode hadn't been helping me remember to do some of those things.
I have 2 questions, if that's okay. Could you go back and explain the meter thing again? I think I was happening too fast.
Oh yeah, so this is not a feature of OrgMode. If you want that thing set up, you're going to have to do a little more diving into my repository. So anyway, I'm clocking these notes. I'm creating these logbook entries. Now that's a standard org feature. And when you're clocked into a task, if that task is showing in the agenda, it will be bright yellow. So if we clock into it, well, I guess it's bright red right now. So So that way, in a list of tasks, you always know which one you're currently clocked into. And in the agenda, you can clock in with capital I and clock out with capital O, and that will just make an entry in your logbook. Then I have an external script called org2tc that turns OrgMode clock tables into time clock files. And time clock is another package within Emacs that I wrote long before I knew about OrgMode that is just a linear list of input-output time events. It's a very simple, basic file format. But it's enough to allow you to generate totals out of what you've done, because you can associate the name of the task with each clock in or clock out. Then Ledger, which is a double entry accounting tool, knows how to directly read in time clock files and treat time as a commodity. So I can go to, let me show you what this looks like. I go to my work org mode and I go to get hours and I run it. And then I go here. Okay, so this is the OrgMode file that resulted from reading in a time clock file. And you can see it just accumulates all this stuff as quantities of seconds. But when Ledger reports it in the shape of hours. And then I can ask, well, what's my balance? Well, I asked it just now to give me all the entries from July 1st to July 30th. And I can ask, what's the weekly balances? What are the daily balances? What's the weekly average? I can ask all these questions of it using Ledger. Well, another thing I can do is I wrote a Haskell program called hours that shells out to Ledger to get these summary details. And that's where it's getting these numbers from. And it's just doing this math of computing from that data, okay, how many hours are in a day? What time zone are you in? How many days are going to be in this month? How many hours is that? How many hours is Ledger telling you worked? What's the ratio? And then basically generating a big block of data in eList format where it's already deciding what the colors of things should be, how wide this bar should be, what this text should be. And now Emacs is shelling out to hours to get that data, and then just using that data for a very simple program called job hours that just reads this data, and then this is the whole function. It just basically looks at the color that hours told it to use, converts it to an RGB value, applies a text property to that string so that it does have that color. So it's like, what, 5 steps removed from OrgMode, but it's a little brittle. I can't really say I recommend anybody trying to use it, but I find it incredibly useful for helping me maintain some kind of balance. I don't mind overworking, but I want to know when I'm doing it. I want to know because I'm taking that time away from other things, from family, from other friends. I just want to know. I want to be conscious of time. And that's what I'm using OrgMode to do.
Cool. Okay, my other question. I'm sort of an org newbie. I think I just use it for presentations. And I was wondering, there's a lot of stuff here I see. It looks like you're looking at information that summarizes data from a whole bunch of different org files, like spread over. And I'm used to thinking of everything in Emacs as like, I have one buffer that's looking at one file, and I'm not used to it kind of, summarizing information from other places. So like, how does this all know? Like, did you tell it, okay, all of this stuff is source all of these files and so on?
Yeah, I mean, this would be stuff you'd get in the first few chapters of the OrgMode manual. But there is a file called org agenda files. A customization variable. So if you customize that, it's just a list of all the files you want to participate in the agenda report. And OrgMode makes this really easy. If you're in an OrgMode file, wherever it happens to live, I think you just type like Control-C, Control-Right, square bracket or something, and it will just automatically add it to that list. And now when you pull up an agenda report, it'll be pulling it from that file as well. And then you would just have to go to the customization here and just do Control-X, Control-S, and save the customization. And it would get loaded on your next run of Emacs. But I really have to leave that kind of stuff to the OrgMode manual, because getting it all set up does take a little bit of time and love and attention. But what I kind of want to get across tonight is just this philosophy of using it as a lightweight tool to put a little bit more structure around a life that ought to probably be creative and random in a lot of ways, but with just a tiny bit of bounding. It's kind of like putting the water of the Nile into the channel of a river. Then it just has more force. And that's really what time management is about.
Do you do journaling in OrgMode or something else?
I have done, yeah, on several different occasions.
What was the question?
Sorry, thank you for asking that. He asked, do I do journaling in OrgMode? And I do sometimes. I've had files called journal.org where each headline will be a date. And I just make notes about the day. And it's really useful when I do it because very often I'll remember something and somebody asks me, oh, and I'll say, I remember making a note about that months ago. But it takes time. It takes a habit to do that. You have to sit down at the end of each day or at a certain time during each day and give like a half an hour to that task. I just end up letting that fall by the wayside. And then the journal, the last entry was 6 months ago, and then I just get this shame spiral going whenever I look at it. I just stop adding to it.
Do you make use of like tags either on ingesting the task or otherwise, you're tagging, like a hashtag in some respects?
I use tags all the time. Yes. Okay, so let's take a little look into, I don't know if this open source OrgMode has it, but I have some tags. So tags for me give context. And the reason I want context is that if I'm at the cafe, there's only so many kinds of tasks I can do. I may not be in a setting where I could call people without being rude. I certainly I'm not there to do errands. I may not have internet access. So when I pull up the list of tasks for the day, what I'll get, here I'll just add a tag. Oh, it's already got it on. So errand, right? And it's marked errand because I have to take a trip here to do this task. So if I type /-e, it will take all errand tasks out of the list. I also use net to have the presence of network. I use call to have the presence of a phone. I use reply, meaning that this is something I have to answer to somebody rather than do. They're just waiting on me to answer a question. So I should consider that a lower cost task sometimes than some others. I may tag them with the names of people. So people that I work with a lot or with my wife's name, I have a tag for her too. So that if she's not around, it's not that I don't want the task to be done that day, so I want it to stay in the agenda, but I want to drop it off. And then Org has this really cool feature, which is auto contexting, which is you can type, if you have it set up, like as it comes by default, it's not going to do anything, but if I hit /return, it runs a list function that inspects my environment. So it tries to ping a host that I know. It checks the time of day to see if it would be a good idea to call people. It looks for all the things my computer can know just by looking at the environment, and it auto strips out all the items that are tagged with things I clearly couldn't do right then. So if it's 2 a.m., it'll take out errand tasks, for example. So tags for the context is another thing I got from GTD, and I have found it pretty useful. So when I go through my to-do review, I'll look at all the issues that don't have tags over in my personal file, and I'll just tag every single one of them that could have a tag because they help me manage the workload and localize it to my current situation.
When I look at an OrgMode entry, it's really busy. There's a lot of stuff in there. There's begin source sh and result scalar and end source and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Does that
like this
properties ID right?
Yeah.
And so to those of us who are weak-minded and want to see the content and not so much the goop.
Right.
Do people hide those? How have people hidden those, or should I really just relax?
Well, there is an exporter. You can export if, I think it's Control-C, Control-E, yeah. Pulls up all of these targets that I can export in org file 2. So, I mean, it's kind of like using LaTeX or Markdown or systems that have an input format that's destined for better form when it's going to be read. You can think of Org as an input format and not as a living document on its own. And then just regularly have a process that exports it to HTML. And when you want to look at your org file, if you're going to look at it that way, if you're writing it to be read, then you could be reading it as a document that's nicely formatted and pretty. Or if you are going to just go in here, get rid of all that stuff. Just write normal text. don't use all those org features that cause the clutter. There's no, OrgMode was designed to infer structure from the contents of the file. There are a lot of things you don't have to put in an OrgMode file for it to still be a useful OrgMode file. I take notes sometimes in OrgMode where I'll just have, foo is some idea, this is about foo, and then I'll say bar is some sub-idea. And then you see the extra dots are going away even. That's another feature of org, and then this is about Baz. And now it's as clean as any other data source I would have looked at. So as a note taker, I tend to use org more that way. But for tasks, this is more about the data than it is about the presentation, because I'm going to look at this data through the agenda view or through the view of next items.
I noticed you had a little bit of word babble, and I was just wondering if you could expound how you use it or don't use it. So I find it useful and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah, well, in a file like this, in a to-do file, I'm only going to use it for the syntax highlighting, really, so that I know I'm writing this example code correctly. If we go to another file, though, like, let's look at a file here. What would be a good one? Lenses, putting lenses to work. Okay, so I use OrgBeamer when I want to write slides. So in OrgBeamer, I'm going to use Babel to actually write code. Like, here's some Haskell code. And then I have, this is all governed by a Nix build. There's a Nix build in this directory that will extract all of these code snippets to a file, build it, and run tests on it, so that I know the contents of the file are valid and that what goes into the slide does what I think that it does. For that use of Babel, I like it, and I'm willing to struggle with its difficulties. But when it's just about keeping track of things that I want to do over here, I'm never going to execute these things. Now for shell scripts, that's a different story. So when I was over in my work file and I had this get hours call, this is just a shell script, and I have this here because I don't want to have to remember all the command line arguments. So I just press Control-C, Control-C. Another great blog article to read is called Literate DevOps. And Literate DevOps is a guy who uses a single OrgMode file to tell a story about how to talk to a server over REST API to have a conversation. He basically scripts out the whole conversation. And he uses Babel features to capture details from prior execution blocks to feed into later execution blocks. And I've done that. I've followed his steps, and it works incredibly well. So there's one file I have here. For the Haskell community, I administrate their mailing lists. So people will always write to me and say, I can't unsubscribe. Can you please get me off of this list? And they ask infrequently enough that I literally never remember how to unsubscribe someone from those mailing lists. So I come into this file, and this is the only thing I need to do it. I will run the very first thing here, which SSH is over to the host. Then I run this one, stty-echo, because I just found out that was needed. I run hostname so that I can see this result and know I'm connected to the right place and that everything's working so far. And then this will set the path up so that Mailman is accessible. And then I have a section for every different thing I might want to do. So unsubscribing a user. I just have to put their email address here that they put in their email. And I hit Control-C, Control-C here. I changed the name of the list too. Like, let's say it's Haskell Libraries or something. Now the person's removed from the list, and I don't have to remember how to do that, right? This file remembers how to do that, which is the beauty of capturing information like this in an encoded form. This file is not only telling me how to do it, it is actually doing it by me going from step to step. And if ever I get unclear, or I'm like, yeah, what does that really mean again? I've written text for myself back in the day when I did understand what that did, and made notes to future me. So that is one of the amazing uses. And he has some great examples too in his Literate DevOps article of things he does with it. There's a REST API library for Emacs, and he makes good use of that. And also SQLite to send database queries. Michael?
What are some options for delegating work or collaborating? Like maybe bijecting with Jira or otherwise sharing files, things like that.
Oh, that type of delegation. I thought you meant the delegated task statements. Yeah, I just say delegated, and then the meaning of the task then is go bug the person that I mentioned in the delegation. If I type it without a capital G, it wants me to make a note. So I said Michael Krogan to do this. No. All right, and now I'll schedule this for Wednesday, and what it will mean is go ping Michael and see if he got it done. In terms of integrating with other systems, there are people who have taken on that noble and lofty task of doing bidirectional synchronization. So there is OrgJira, and it does work. I've used it. It will pull all your stuff down from Jira into org files where you can now do agenda reports over them. Going the other direction is a little bit trickier, but it is possible. The technology exists. I don't use it really much. I wrote one that did the same for Bugzilla, but it was back for a much, much older version of Bugzilla. I don't know that that's a super developed field of people wanting to view things in org mode, but have them live somewhere else. I do believe that for a to-do system to be effective, there really needs to be one of them. Because whichever one is the current thing demanding your attention, that's the one you'll pay attention to. So if you only have one to pay attention to, it becomes more effective as a manager of your time. So what I will do is from my Jira workload, I'll cherry pick the most important stuff and I will echo them as org mode tasks manually. And then I will just make the link be the URL of the Jira task. So that when I want to go work on it, I can jump into Jira.
I just thought, in response to the previous question, I quickly mentioned that org mode also lets you define custom link types. And so, like for Jira, for example, I have a custom Jira link type that just takes the Jira tag and will link directly to that issue or whatever. It makes it very easy to go back and forth.
Yeah.
But I do also have a question. and my question is, you've been using this for a while. Are there workflows that you've used in the past that you abandoned because you found that they were not that effective?
Oh, with org mode?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question because this has all become very streamlined as everything that didn't work got ejected. I'm pretty sure that there were. I think I used to spend more time curating the tasks than I do now. I try to go with a pretty minimal set of information, and by now, because everything takes energy, right? And when you're enthusiastic about something or it's new to you, you kind of have a surfeit of energy. And it's easy for you to set yourself up for future failure because future you does not have that same energy for whatever it is you're excited about. Even love doesn't work that way, right? So if you can economize down to the value, that creates a more consistent and repeatable thing. So what I've done is I've sort of over time squeezed out. So I can't tell you all the individual things that I squeezed out. Maybe this properties drawer used to have more information in it and I just realized I'm not really using it. Like I could, this UUID stuff, if it weren't so automatic, I would very likely drop it because I'm not getting much value. Last created, even that's debatable. I'm not sure I'm getting that much value from it. So what I would do is just see what works for you, and you'll discover over time what things you need to optimize out.
Hello, thanks for your talk, by the way. Question, where do you keep your all your org stuff, or where do you run Emacs from? Do you try to keep it on a single machine on your laptop, or do you actually put it on the cloud or somewhere and you just always remote to it?
No, I run 2 Emacs, in fact, on whatever machine I happen to be using, either on my desktop at home or when I'm going to switch to this laptop. I wrote a program called Push Me after Push Me Pull You, so that when I'm at home, I close all applications and I type Push Me, the name of this laptop. So this laptop is Hermes. I say Push Me Hermes, and it knows about all the file sets that I use in all the locations of my hard drive, and it replicates them onto this machine in the same places. For the file sets it knows ought to be here, because not every file set that's on the desktop is also here. Some are bigger, too big. And then when I'm done working here, I close all the applications and I say Push Me Vulkan, and then everything goes to the home machine. So at any one moment in time, whatever machine I'm in front of is the exact same user experience as every other machine I might use. And Nix really helps me keep that consistency across all of these machines, using not only Nix on Darwin, but also a project called Nix Darwin and a project called Home Manager, because they will let me manage system settings, home.files, and then all the packages that I want to keep installed. And so that environment replicated on all the machines. The only thing it's not replicating is the data sets. And that's where PushMe comes in. So PushMe defines all these data sets, syncs them everywhere that I want to go. It also syncs them to backup locations as well. I have some USB sticks I can sync, PushMe stuff to as well. So I'm always using a different Emacs. The second Emacs that I'm usually running, as well as this one, is running ERC, the Emacs IRC client. Just so that whatever I'm doing, jumping to an IRC channel doesn't take over my windowing and I lose my debugging state or whatever I was doing at that time. I want to be able to really quickly toggle between the two of them or kill IRC to make it go away suddenly. So that's an Emacs for every computer, that's there.
Hi, I saw Cock, the proof systems.
Yes.
I was wondering what you use it for. And, I saw a lot of Pascal, so I was wondering if you, whether something interesting, you integrated with Emacs in some way. Does it change your coding style or something like that? Anything?
Is that a little too off topic for tonight? Because I don't want to take time from people who want to say stuff about work.
As long as
I mean, if I'm going to work in Cock on Emacs, I'm using Proof General, right? That's the whole nice, beautiful visual environment for interactively doing proofs. And it has this beautiful way of coloring everything that is type checked up to the point you're working on. And it's a really a gorgeous environment. I don't know much more there is to say about that. I will make notes because this is my Cock project. So the stuff I'm working on in Cock is under here. And so many of these notes are going to have little snippets of Cock just to remind me, give me enough context to know what that issue was about. But Cock is the language I would be working on most of the time if I were independently wealthy, because I find it incredibly addictive. It's the best game ever created. Can't even tell you how many hours of my life are now part of Cock. Yes.
So I have seen a lot of videos about OrgMode, and all of the videos basically talk about the setup that they have, and it's all like finished product.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking that, yes, this is awesome, but how do I start?
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations? Do you have any tutorials that you think are really, really good that you can follow this and stick to it and like sustain with this?
Well, when I started using OrgMode was when Carsten was first writing it, so I don't know what good tutorials there are because that wasn't what I needed at the time, or I did need it, but it didn't exist. So I would just Google nowadays. Maybe there's a ton of great tutorials. I was going to say if you want to get started with OrgMode, start out with a blank file. Just install OrgMode, go into some blank file, put it into OrgMode, and just use the bullet outlining to just get an outline down on paper of just things you want to pay attention to in your life. It's kind of like a mind map. And then use the feature of being able to call some of these to do. And that's it. If you just start with there, you're already like 50% of what I'm actually using my system to do. All the bells and the whistles for me is just about scaling. Being able to manage thousands of tasks without dropping stuff on the floor, and being able to have different automated views of those tasks, cutting it based on what I want to pay attention to at a given point in time. But if I just had the mind map file, I'd already be leaps and bounds ahead of not having this stuff written down anywhere. And I even do that myself sometimes. If I'm trying to get my handle on a work responsibility that's complex, I'll sort of sweep all the complexity away, and I will just do a sort of mind map outline in OrgMode, and then start refiling stuff into the projects in my work file, and now start enriching them with all that additional context.
I would just second that. I've been using OrgMode for a really long time, and it organizes my entire life. Lots of similarities, which is really fun to see. But for me, I started out exactly as John said, writing down like a dump of my mind and trying to assign to-dos to it. And I've been through maybe 4 major reorganizations of like my sets of files over time. It's like I realized there were things I wanted to do that Org could do for me. Org is incredibly configurable. In the end, you can do anything you want because there's Lisp underneath all of it, right? But just getting started is the best way because different things work well for different people. And if what you do is you try and find the perfect already existing configuration out there, the likelihood you're going to find the person that works exactly the way you do and use it is really low. So start with something simple and then evolve it and you'll get there.
So I'll end with this little funny note. So I used to use Emacs so heavily, Carsten would get email from me all the time. And one of the things was, I used to work really, really late at night. That hasn't been my pattern for the last couple of years, but I would work until 4 a.m., 5 a.m. And it was really frustrating to have all these tasks scheduled for the day, and then at midnight, they all became overdue, right? They didn't feel as good, and I didn't want to go through rescheduling them all right then. I wanted that switchover to happen when I was asleep. So I wrote into Carsten and I asked, can you help me with this? And so he actually, he added my name here into the documentation of this Org extend today until. So you can give a number of hours here and it will make midnight be that far into the future. And so he said, really, it's only here because past midnight seems to be the favorite working time of John Wiegley. So thank you, Carsten, for that. Thanks, everyone, for your questions and your attention.
Yeah, so I thought I'd just give a quick demo of how I put together presentations with OrgMode and Refile.js. It's actually, I think, the same thing that Jeff had at the very beginning of this meetup, I noticed. I mean, I've been seeing more and more people use Refile.js lately. Essentially, when I go to design a talk or a presentation of some sort, I usually have a kind of a life cycle with several different OrgMode files. So, for example, I start out with a file that just has ideas in it. Then that gets turned into an outline. And then eventually the outline, I mean, is just an org file, which I'm really using like a normal outline mode. There's not that much to it. But the interesting step is when I actually go to build the files, we end up with an OrgMode outline for the entire presentation that can then be compiled to a bunch of different formats. And I mean, people do this with a bunch of other things, including Beamer with LaTeX. But I've been using this JavaScript system called Refile.js. And so the particularly nice things with this approach, one is just that using the normal OrgMode files. Okay, looks like the computer's frozen for some reason. Yeah, so using the normal OrgMode files, you get all the advantages of having an outline, but you can navigate, you can collapse, you can move around. Apparently it also crashes Emacs sometimes. But ignoring that, it's also surprisingly capable because it has a way for you to include math using MathJax and images and custom layouts. And then also, if you really need to fiddle with the low-level details of a slide, you can actually write custom HTML, right? Well, okay, this is, and so unfortunately, as I said, like Emacs froze. Otherwise, I'd show you the different pieces. But then once you actually go to do these slides, you can just use the export facility that John showed off and export it to an HTML slideshow. And then this slideshow, it works pretty well, and you can do all kinds of customization depending on what you want your presentation to look like. And then another nice feature is that as you're developing, you can export a single slide at a time. So you just make a change and then immediately see that change on the slide you're working on, which can really lower the iteration time between doing your slide and looking to see what it actually looks like. And then another bonus of using Refile specifically is that apart from just being web-based and working on any kind of computer, you can actually look at the presentation on your phone, and because it's all JavaScript and CSS, it automatically resizes and works with touch events. And then if you really need to, you can export it to a PDF, which, again, looks pretty close to the version that was running natively in the browser. And so the combination of being able to easily lay out and compile a full presentation inside Emacs using OrgMode, and then all the flexibility that I get by doing a web-based system with Refile.js has kind of made this my favorite approach to doing presentations out of the various things I've tried. And certainly, like, I found that this is somewhat nicer than using any of the other web-based solutions or using Beamer. So, and that's really kind of the entire process, more or less, for what it takes to do a presentation in OrgMode. I mean, in practice, I have a whole bunch of configuration on top that I just copy and paste from presentation to presentation. And then the structure of the actual org file looks pretty close to an outline of what goes on each slide. There's a little bit of extra metadata around links and images and code, but beyond that, it's actually really easy to quickly see a high-level overview of the entire presentation, move stuff around, and make kind of global edits. Because instead of having this kind of visual slide view, you just have a nice text outline that is actually pretty close to what I would, in the past, write up before creating my slides. Right? And I mean, I think that's really all there is to how you can do presentations with OrgMode. So, any questions or?
Hi, I was wondering if you can speak to the metadata at the top. Is that something?
Sure, yeah. And again, unfortunately, it isn't even scrolling. But basically, there are a whole bunch of options that are specific to the Refile.js exporter. So for example, I have a whole bunch of settings. Like I have a custom CSS theme that I use for my presentations. And so here, one of the options says Refile theme Tikhon, which is my theme. Similarly, there's a really handy option that lets you tell OrgMode how many levels are considered equivalent. So the way the presentation works is if you want to have optional slides, then if you go beyond, in my case, header level 2, so if you have a level 3, the slide is actually positioned kind of below your other slides, letting you skip it in the presentation. And the nice thing is that since this is configurable, I can reserve several levels for my own organization. So here, the stuff in blue and the stuff in yellow all appears as just slides one after the other. But when I'm looking at this at a high level, I have this nice hierarchy that lets me see the individual sections I have in my presentation. And again, it just makes it much easier to organize things at a high level. And then I also have custom CSS for all of the top level section slide that divide sections. And then there's a bunch of other metadata around things like whether the slides have little arrow controls on them. So like when I give a presentation, I don't want the arrows, but when I put it online, I have people emailing me asking, well, how do you actually advance the slideshow? So having little arrows you can click actually really helps with that. And so settings like that all just go into this massive header on top. Actually, the one hack that I should also mention is that the custom title slide is also one of these settings on top, where I just have like 1,000 character line long, 1,000 character long line full of HTML that just lays out this custom header. And so the one downside with this is that it actually requires you to reload the whole org file before recompiling to see changes to the very first title slide. Okay, any other questions?
Just a small question on your org file.
Yeah.
I noticed that one of those headers is underscore and then the rest. Is that a particular syntax?
That's a good question. So I think what happens is that I have a bunch of slides here where I don't want any title at all. And so I just have like an OrgMode header with a space in it. And I think either the way it collapses it at an underscore, or I might have needed an underscore to make the exporter happy. But it's not actually supposed to be a real title. Okay. And again, I guess it might not have been clear originally, but like the high level title here, like SMT, is one of the titles here. And so from the outline, it actually compiles like the main text for the slide from the text in the header.
I've got one also. I was wondering, do you have any of this online? Because my reveal slides are pretty much default everything, and this looks pretty slick.
Yeah, so I mean, I have all of the stuff to do this exists in my talks repo. Unfortunately, it's not really organized for people who aren't me. But if you look around, there's like a bunch of custom CSS and JavaScript lying around, and it's just on my GitHub/talks.
Can you touch upon what you enjoy running on? Can you touch upon what you like about using the Reveal.js instead of Beamer?
Sure, that's a good question. Like, what I like about Reveal over Beamer. So honestly, one of the biggest things is that in Beamer, the defaults are not really well designed for presentations, which is not a great property of a presentation tool. And so with Beamer, I think I would have to spend a lot of time heavily customizing the layout and tech. And I'm just a lot more comfortable heavily customizing stuff with CSS and JavaScript. So it was a lot easier for me to get the kind of slide layout and style that I wanted, right? And then also at the same time, the other benefit is that because this generates a JavaScript thing, it's very format independent. I can just put it on my website, and I know that literally any modern device is going to render this. And because the browser is pretty good at dealing with different devices and different screen sizes, it's going to look good pretty much on any device that I open it. And in the past, this has been super useful because, like, I have this new MacBook, it's full of USB-C. So, you know, I show up to a conference and you don't have a dongle, I have to borrow somebody's laptop. And in practice, it seems very consistent just to be able to go to a URL and just have it work. Oh, and I guess the other advantage is that people are a lot more hesitant to like download a URL, a PDF if they want to see something. But if it just opens up on a web page, it's pretty nice. Although I guess with Chrome and Firefox building in PDF readers, this isn't really much of an issue anymore.
Thanks very much.
All right.
I don't even hope to live up to the standards of org usage we've seen here tonight, but I'm gonna show some remedial stuff about coding in org mode that I learned recently. Let's see here. That looks like it. That work? Did that look like a, I guess we don't need this anymore. All right, everyone see, it looks all right. Okay. I'm just going to show what I've learned. I basically, I'm not doing literate programming or anything like that, but what I do need to do is give presentations where I have source code. And I need to show people how it works and then intersperse that with slides with text and drawings and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to take you real quick through some of the stuff that I've recently learned to do. In order to run the code that I've written inside this org file, I have to go set up a couple of languages here. And so this actually allows me to do the first feature. Oh, I forgot to run forgot to do the screen key thing. Maybe I can find it. Oh, let's see, did I do it right? Yeah, run this eLisp code, absolutely. Okay, so if I'm right, I've just set this up so I can run the C++ and Python code. I just went into this source code block and I typed Control-C, Control-C. And so let's see. I'm going to show you first an example in Python. Let's see here. So we have a lot of, I often want to do presentations, and so I want to not show all of the boilerplate. Usually it's most interesting to viewers just to see the relevant code. And so I put as much as I can into this preamble or header stuff that you can do inside the source code blocks. So here I've done a lot of imports and stuff like that. So let me go show you what it looks like when I export that. And okay. So here you can see that I just have the stuff I want to show people and not all the other junk. So that was exported into Beamer. So let's see. Now let me actually execute this with Control C again. You can see this is doing a kind of a scan operation, an arithmetic scan across an array, doing accumulated sums. So let's do the same thing in C++. Again, totally different syntax for the boilerplate on the top, but still same idea. And let's see, this is going to compile and then execute it. Let's see what happens when I do that. And there's, oops, unfortunately, screen key is kind of covering this up, but you can actually see I got the same answer, which is good. Let me see here. The other thing you can do, which is kind of neat, is you can actually feed source code that's in the file from a list or a table. In this case, I'm showing a table, and I'm using this little Python thing to sort the table based on a particular column. In this case, the second one, or the index 1. So let's see that. And sure enough, I've now sorted these national labs by the state that they're in alphabetically. And of course, the table still has this nice appearance. Let's see, there we go. So that looks okay. The last problem I like to solve, go down here and find it. Yeah, you can control, when you're doing an export like I just did to Beamer, you can control whether for each source code block the results or the out, meaning like as a value, like the last thing calculated is exported, or the stuff that was printed to standard out. There's another technique that I've recently figured out how to do, which involves kind of incorporating fragments of other code. Sometimes the boilerplate stuff doesn't fit neatly in the preamble or the header control line, and you want to do kind of other stuff. You just want to generally, you want to control more, in a more complex way, the things that you're actually showing. Here what I'm going to do is, I'm going to show some code here. This is some C++ code. And in my presentation, I just want to see this. But actually, I'm going to be running, this is the same as the Python code I just showed, where we're sorting on a different key in the table. So this is all the stuff that I'm really going to execute. And then this is the fragment that I actually want to show in the presentation here. So let's look at the fragment in the presentation real quick. So there you can see it's just that little fragment there, and nothing else appears. So let's see then. The thing I like to do when I'm trying to debug this is to figure out. Sometimes it doesn't compile right, and so I've got these two pieces of code separated. I want to see the whole thing together so I understand what's actually being compiled and then executed. And then that's Control-C, Control-V, V. And now we get this zoomed in thing. Wait, I'm sorry. On the right-hand side, which you can't see because it's really hard to see. On the right-hand side, this is the code that was actually produced by Emacs. So it does a whole lot of stuff to feed the table data in and everything like that. And if you're wondering why your code isn't working, you can go over here and see it. And here's my sort function, and then the fragment that was inserted into the middle. So it's all there for you to see. And let's make sure that I talked about everything I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, that's kind of a cool thing. Control-C single quote will bring up, see if this will actually work. Return to existing edit buffer will change, yes, I guess. Probably because I exited the wrong way. It brings up the source code block in the native mode. So when I do that and I'm in OrgMode and I'm in a source code block that's in C++, it brings up my C++ stuff. If I'm in a Python block, it brings up my Python stuff. And I guess that was all I wanted to show you. Thank you. Anyone have any questions about this? Basic stuff. No, there's one in the back.
Yeah, how do you get the data from the table into your actual code?
Yeah, there's a that's a great question, and I should have probably highlighted this a little bit more. I'm just going to undo all of that. Let's see. So here's the table. The special thing that does it is this :var here. It's kind of two parts. So this Python code is going to pick up something I defined somewhere else called national labs, and make it a variable called NL that I can use inside Python. Oh, and that's the name of the table. So that's how the connection is made.
Cool.
There's-
So what
there's-
does the AL stand for? Oh, national lab.
Oh, yeah, you got it. Okay.
Sorry, just to elaborate, that's a little bit on that detail. So OrgMode knows how to translate an OrgMode table into something that the language understands?
Yeah, there's I believe a special mode for each language. Maybe somebody knows more than me, but I think it was OB something. It's like OBC.L was the one for C, C++, and D, and then there's an OB Python, and each of them you go find they have a separate manual page explaining how they figure all that stuff out, which is why I think the syntax wasn't quite consistent between the boilerplate for Python and the boilerplate for C++. Something like that. Yeah. Anyway, that's how I'm learning to make presentations. Thank you, Org. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I could. I mean, I've been watching along. I could talk about some things we've been doing in scientific paper writing, if that.
That would be awesome. Please do.
We have, yeah. How about let me see if I can share my screen. All right, can you see it?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
Okay. How long should I talk?
Sorry, John. People are making funny comments like no more than an hour. I think the biggest request right now is that the type be a little bit larger. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I'll do maybe is just give like a pretty brief overview of how we've been writing scientific papers. Most of what I'm showing you is going to be in this Cymax distribution that I've been working on for a number of years. And one of the things that I've been trying to do is make OrgMode into, you know, the finest scientific publishing tool that is around. And so I'm a professor of chemical engineering, and writing papers and reports and proposals and all manner of these things is like what I spend a lot of my time on. And so we've written maybe close to 30 papers in OrgMode right now. I think that's probably the most of anyone in the world that I know of. And along the way, kind of invented a lot of tools to make this easier for us. So maybe what I'll do here is show, we've collected over, you know, the last 5 years some templates, and let me get my screen set up here so that I can see. So I have written a little package called Ox Manuscript, which is some set of tools in OrgMode that I've written specifically for writing scientific publications. And so the challenge is most publications won't take OrgMode. They will take a LaTeX manuscript, but they often want the manuscript in a very specific way that isn't how we would write it. And so some of the things that I've done are try to automate some of those issues away so that I can concentrate on writing. And for example, right now I'm just loading the set of templates that I can choose here. These are all of the journals and or reports that we've collected things from. So I can like start a new NSF proposal, start things related to manuscripts. I'll pick ACS catalysis as a template here. And what this does then, it just inserts a bunch of boilerplate stuff that I know worked for a previous article. And I have all of these little red things are things we should replace, just so we know what kinds of things we want to do in here. And so you get the idea. This is just some fun syntax highlighting code that I wrote to recognize this angle pattern and make it red so that it's very obvious I ought to replace it. And so otherwise, this is a regular looking kind of org file. One of the things we have to do a lot is put citations to the scientific literature. And so I wrote this package called OrgRef specifically for that purpose. And so we use BibTeX is the format that we store everything in. And what I've done is written something that will parse this BibTeX file and give me a nice convenient interface to select references from that. And so let's say I'm writing along up here and I want to insert a citation, then we type Control-C right bracket, and it will give me this sort of drop-down list, and I can start typing in Kitchin, maybe data sharing, and then when I press enter on this, it will just insert a citation. And now if I add another one, let's see what else is in here. Let's put this new one here. We'll just add it on with it and put the comma in there for me. And so these are custom org links. And so I added a lot of customization of the org links in OrgMode 9. And among the things that we added were an ability to change the color. So these links are green, which makes them stand out as a citation link. And if I hover over this, I see a tooltip that tells me exactly what reference that is. And if I hover over this one, I see the tooltip that's associated with that one. And then I can click on this link and I get a menu down here at the bottom that lets me do things like open the URL or find related or citing articles in Web of Science. A lot of times I'll need to send in this to one of my students. So if I press E, then it will open an email with the BibTeX entry automatically inserted. And you can see down here at the bottom, it's attached to PDF. And then I can just add an email address from my contact database. I don't know, let's look up. Something like that. And then I can send it. The other thing that these links do is if I press P, it will open a PDF, which I guess you won't be able to see happen since I only shared the Emacs window. But I can do all kinds of other things down here, like maybe we can jump to the entry. So if I press O, it'll jump to the BibTeX entry, and then I can do whatever I need from there. So I use this kind of all the time. It's a super simple way for me to insert the citations. And if I accidentally delete a letter, then the whole thing turns red because it knows this is not a key in the BibTeX entry. And so this also gives me like some easy way to check that everything is in order with the citations. So another thing that, that we often need to do is make references to sections. So the way you do that in LaTeX is you put a label somewhere and then you put a ref. And so in OrgRef, I can also use a prefix command, Control-U, Control-C bracket, and then I can put in any label I want like this, and it will insert, maybe it's to control use for the label. And it will insert a label link up here. And then if I want to make a reference to it later, then it will give me a completion of all the things that I can label. And these links now will be like a magenta color. And again, if I hover over this, usually it will tell me something is there. But it seems like something has gone wrong here. Live demos, right? Oh, well, that was really bad. That was a whole Emacs crash. Okay. Let me get back up here. It was a really special special live demo fail. So while this is starting up, those BibTeX files have, you know, something like several thousand BibTeX entries in them. And so I had to do some kind of clever things with caching to make it efficient. All right, so now this is, my Emacs is back up. So I heard somebody ask about journaling earlier. I'm going to take a little convoluted path to get back to this document. So I use it for journaling all the time. And so I have this massive set of hydras set up where I just press, I have caps lock down to F12 and it opens this so I can press A and then JJ gets me into the journal and that opens up to the current day of the journal. And so this is where I started. Let's see, I guess this is the save file to the rescue. Like something kind of always in the way here. Okay, so so here is my label, and if I mouse over this, it tells me there's only one occurrence. If we expand this, here I get some tooltip that gives me some context about where that reference is. And this gets extremely helpful in really long documents with many labels and many things in there. So the other thing we do quite a lot is similar to what you just showed about literate programming. So we use internal blocks in here for generating our figures all the time. And some of the things that we've done in using IPython is in Cymax is we've made it so that these figures automatically get put into the buffer. Over here, let's say I don't remember what the linspace syntax is. We can do a command that shows us the docstring for it using Python to get all of this information. And we can have multiple figures in here too if we want. And this will insert two figures automatically into our buffer, where this one is 2 times this one. So then this comes down at the bottom, since we might not write, an ACS catalysis paper more than once a year. One of the things that happens in the journals is we make the figures in PNG because it's convenient and it's easy to stick into these figures, but the journals typically want an EPS version. And so the EPS version is the one that gets uploaded when we do the submission. And so we have to do some kind of clever tricks to munge the LaTeX to accommodate this so that we get the right one. And so that happens down here in this build manuscript, where this command will generate the LaTeX file, build it, and then open it. And then this command will create a standalone bibliography code that gets inserted into the LaTeX document. Because we usually don't want to send our 10,000 BibTeX entry file to the journal. We only want to send the ones that they want. And they typically don't want a BibTeX file. They want it inserted directly into the LaTeX file. And so we have written code that kind of does this. Let's take a look at kind of what it does. So here we build the submission manuscript. Let's go back to this one. So this one is going to create an org file, create a text file, clean it up. It exports it to LaTeX, and then it removes the image extensions, and then it converts our bibliography to a BBL file, and then it runs through LaTeX to build it and generate something that we can submit for consideration. So another thing that I often need to do when I'm iterating on these with students is I need to write comments in here and kind of give them some feedback on what we need to do. And so I also created this, I call it the Cymax edit marks idea. And that is, it will be easiest to show you. So I can insert an edit mark. Here I usually will say a comment. And here I might say add labels to the axes. And these are a special markup that are not org syntax, but they get converted into like comments and notes in the PDF, so that this will end up being at the top a list of these kinds of edit marks that I can see. And I can also do things like, let's see, Laura, let's do this. Let's say I just want to delete this word, but I want to indicate that it should be deleted, then I can put that. And then if I want to say insert, add this text, and then it starts to kind of look like track changes if you've ever used that feature in Word. There is, let's say I'll be really brave and try adding track changes, and then up here, as I delete it, it will automatically track the kinds of things that we do. So I find that, kind of helpful. If you're over here, I can accept this, and if I press A, it will just delete it. If you decide to reject it, then it will just remove it and keep it. And you can go through the document kind of like with track changes. You can accept all and accept next, etc. And I find that to be kind of helpful, especially for writing proposals. I can get to a list that shows me all of the edit marks in a document and kind of easily jump to each one. And then I can use this to help make sure everything that I needed to get done actually is done. So let's see, I think that probably kind of hits the high marks of what I thought I would talk about. Are there things anybody is interested in hearing more about on this?
You can't see, but I'm looking around for people asking questions. Oh, that's it.
Hi, John. Sorry, I had to step out for a bit, so you might have already covered this, but you mentioned that journals accept text files and not org files.
Yeah.
So, is this generating text in some way, or or how does it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So if the normal OrgMode has a regular exporter. So if I do like a Control C, Control E, then you can export this as a LaTeX file. So if I pick L here and then capital L, this will generate a LaTeX buffer that contains the LaTeX code that will generate a PDF, like so. And what I mentioned before, for example, this LaTeX code has the PNG file with the full extension in here, which is perfectly fine for PDF LaTeX. And if you're making your own PDF for your own purpose, it's okay. But journals typically want an EPS file for this, encapsulated PostScript. And so we have to get rid of this PNG extension so that it can use an EPS extension. And the other thing that journals don't like is they don't want to see this bibliography file here that references, that is a BibTeX file. They would rather see the explicit version of this that has the references in line. And so let's take a look at how different that is down here. So let me just run this line. So usually these are tagged no export, which means none of these will appear. And let's see, I probably have to do some other share thing here because you don't see a PDF, right?
Correct.
Okay, let me see maybe I'll just share the whole, hopefully there's nothing embarrassing on my desktop here. So that generated this PDF and these funny like characters here and here. Can you see the PDF now? Yes. This is because I didn't replace those things in bright red. This is an example of the comment that I added. So there's a to-do list here that will disappear when all of those are gone. And here we have this sort of idea over here of what we have to do. And this is how my delete and insert comments got marked up. And so here are the two references that normally would get put in. So let's look at the text file. Oh, the text file is these text files get cleaned up in my automatic build, so they tend to not hang around. Let's see. When I run the submission version, this is the text file that gets generated. And a couple of things that are different is you notice here there's no PNG file because it gets stripped off so that you can use EPS if you want. And then at the end, we have this very difficult to read code that is inserted by LaTeX. And here is the bibliography file. So what's interesting about this is now this is a standalone text file that has the bibliography automatically formatted and everything in it. And this is the way most journals want your LaTeX file. But I don't have to do anything to get this. It just gets generated by the OrgMode export code that I wrote for it. So the short answer is yes, it generates LaTeX for you. And maybe let me, Well, let's see. There's a reasonable looking manuscript I can show you that is an actual paper that we wrote. So what I'm looking at right now is an OrgMode database that I wrote to keep track of all of these things. So every file that we create in OrgMode gets indexed into a SQLite database so that I can jump around and get back to any file I've written in the last 5 years. So this is what an actual journal article that we wrote looks like. So some of it is like there's a little bit of raw LaTeX here, but down here is where we have our regular OrgMode file. These are all of the references that get put in here. There's many of them. It's all organized in a regular kind of scientific paper. Have some equations. Eventually we have some figures. Some tables like this. And then typically we have our supporting information file that has lots of code in it. And so we try to include all of the code we use to generate the results, to generate the figures. So for example, this is how we made a particular figure in the paper, and we can go back and see how it was made, see where the data came from, see how it was stored, etc. So these end up being kind of quite long. This one is 1,300 lines long as a supporting information file. And if we look at how those get turned into PDFs, let's see, the manuscript ends up looking like this. So this looks almost like a regular journal article. It's because we use the journal's LaTeX style, like that. And the supporting information files have, let's see, did we do it in this one? We even embed data files in the PDFs from the OrgMode. So maybe I'll show you that kind of minor detail. This attached file here is a LaTeX package that will embed this JSON data inside the PDF. And so that's what you see over here are data files embedded in the PDF so that once you download it, it has all of the data in it that you need. And so this generates the table of contents for us and has all of the code with syntax highlighting. This one has the supporting org file embedded inside the PDF. So you can just extract the org file and then you work from that if you know what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to copy and paste this code and try to figure out how to do it. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we do on the scientific publishing side.
Do we have other questions for John? There's a lot of nodding heads in here, though. People very engaged. I think it was really interesting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, maybe. This document just shows a lot of things we've done to IPython. So I forked the OB IPython and then added just lots and lots of interesting ideas on getting documentation, via this question mark and double question marks, getting better exceptions. So, you can see we can capture exceptions instead of having them just disappear into some empty buffer, inspecting code, all kinds of neat things. but I could probably talk about this for a long, long time. So
I hope everyone checks out your videos online. And do you have a channel?
yeah, there is, I guess it's a Kitchin at YouTube or something. Yeah, I have quite a few videos about OrgMode. I haven't made one in a while, but there are a bunch of them.
All right, thanks very much.
Sure.
Do we have any more talks? Anyone else feel moved? I guess that's it. We've had a really enlightening evening and want to thank all the speakers and thanks for everyone who came.
Yep.